VO2 max training for endurance runners. Now, why would an endurance runner whose event is going to take them quite a long time and they're not going to be running at their max speed, why would they care about improving their VO2 max? That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what it is, why you might want to improve it, and how to improve it as well. So VO2 max is the maximum amount of oxygen that your body can actually use per minute. So if you can take in and use more oxygen to burn glucose to produce energy, you will produce more energy per minute, then you will be able to propel yourself forward faster and you'll be a faster runner. So if you're able to use more oxygen, you can produce more energy, you can propel yourself forward faster. That makes you a faster runner. That's why we care about VO2 max. As a rough guide, if you were to go outside now and after a good warm-up, do a 5-minute time trial. So you would just run as fast as you can for 5 minutes. During that 5 minutes, when you're running as fast as you can for that amount of time, you're going to be you'll be using roughly the maximum amount of oxygen you can actually use. So that's a good way to test your VO2 max pace, because your 5-minute pace is a rough approximation of the pace you are running while you are using as much oxygen as you possibly could. Now, the reason that we want to improve this, even though we wouldn't be running anywhere near that fast when we're doing like a 10K, a half marathon, definitely not like a marathon or anything. You'll be running much slower than that so you can actually continue the pace. Why would we actually be interested in improving our ability to take in, process, and utilize oxygen? Well, essentially, when you improve your VO2 max, your ability to use oxygen, more oxygen per minute, you are raising the ceiling. You are lifting the ceiling on your running performance so that your other paces have more room to move up. So if your VO2 max pace improves, then your lactate threshold pace has more room to improve. Your first lactate threshold or aerobic threshold, that has more room to improve as well. Now, the way this works is when you do VO2 max interval training, which we're going to go through in a sec, you will do a few things to your body that will actually increase your ability to process and use oxygen. One of them is that you're going to increase your cardiac output, meaning that you're going to pump more blood out of the heart and into the muscles. And obviously the oxygen is within the blood. And that means that you'll transport more oxygen, which means that you can take in and use more oxygen. And then within the muscles, from working on VO2 max intervals, which we'll go through in a second, you're going to increase the number and the efficiency of your mitochondria in your muscles, which are going to process the oxygen to produce energy. So you'll be able to use more oxygen per minute. That'll increase your VO2 max measurement. And you'll be able to do that because you're pumping more blood and you're extracting and using the oxygen in the blood with more efficient and more numerous mitochondria in your muscles. Said more simply, you will be a fitter, faster runner. You'll be using more oxygen and glucose to produce more energy per minute, making you faster. So that's what VO2 max is, and that's why it's helpful to improve it. Now we're going to talk about how do we actually do that. The way that we improve our ability to process and utilize oxygen is that we spend time, we accumulate minutes processing and utilizing as much oxygen as we can. What that means is that we raise the intensity of our running. So we're running fast enough. So we're using as much oxygen as we can, or more than 95% of the total amount of oxygen we could potentially use. If we are over that 95% threshold, then we are going to be using enough oxygen to stimulate the body to say, hey, get better at cardiac output, develop more mitochondria, develop more efficiency in your mitochondria and other such physiological adaptations, which will lead us to then be able to be better at processing and using oxygen in the future. So that's our goal with our VO2 max interval training, is we want to accumulate minutes at or around VO2 max, or 95% of VO2 max. Now, one way you could do this is just the time trial I described earlier. You could just run as fast as you can for 5 minutes, and then you'll accumulate maybe 5 minutes at VO2 max, which isn't a bad way to do it, but there's more efficient ways to do it. This is where intervals come in, because what we find is that if you break it up and give yourself a little rest, you can accumulate more time in and around your VO2 max, where you're using as much oxygen as you possibly can. If you break it up into intervals, you can spend more time in that intensity zone. Now, there's different ways of doing it. 1-to-1 work to rest ratios work. I prefer 2-to-1 work to rest ratios, where you're having twice as long during the interval working to the one, which is the amount of time you're resting. So for example, one that we'll use a lot is 2 minutes as fast as you can. So 2 minutes at max effort pace, followed by 1 minute easy to recover. And then we repeat that a number of times. So let's say 6 times. So we go 2 minutes on, 1 minute off, repeat times 6. That'll give us 12 total minutes at or around 95% of VO2 max intensity. So that's 12 minutes of time where my body is processing and utilizing as much oxygen as it possibly can. And those 12 minutes are the stimulus that my body needs to say, hey, this guy needs to be better at processing and utilizing oxygen because he's just spent 12 minutes doing as much as he can. That's the stimulus. So when I go to sleep tonight and the following night, my body is making those changes, making those adaptations to become better at doing that, improving my cardiac output, improving the number and the quality of my mitochondria. So I'm better able to process oxygen in the future. That's the training effect. That's how we do it. And as you can see, if one workout where I just run as fast as I can for 5 minutes, I spend 5 minutes at VO2 max. If I break it up and do 2-to-1s, I can spend 12 minutes or near enough 12 minutes at VO2 max, which is more of a stimulus to get that adaptation. And one way you could approach this would be to do that 5-minute test I described where you run as fast as you can for 5 minutes, see what your pace is. That's roughly your VO2 max pace. And then you schedule to do that 4 to 8 weeks later. You're going to repeat that test. And during that time, so let's say 8 weeks, you're going to spend doing VO2 max intervals once a week. Let's say the workout I just said. So 2 minutes on, 1 minute off, repeat times 6 or repeat times 4 or repeat times 8, whatever you're going to be doing. But then you do that once a week for 4 to 8 weeks. And then you retest your 5-minute test. And you run as fast as you can for 5 minutes. And you're going to get another estimate of your VO2 max pace, which should be higher, which indicates that your ability to use oxygen has increased. Your body can use more oxygen per minute after this 4 to 8 week training period than it could before. So when your VO2 max increases, as we talked about, by doing these training sessions, you will increase the amount of oxygen you can use. You will also increase the amount of glucose you can use, and you will increase the amount of energy you produce per minute, which you will use to propel yourself forward, i.e. you will run faster per minute. So those are VO2 max intervals. They are an integral part of a training program. They need to be strategically laid out when you're looking at training for an endurance runner. So something that we'll do quite often is we'll do VO2 max intervals quite far away from, say, a marathon or a half marathon, like a few months beforehand. And what we're trying to do is raise the ceiling so that there's more room for the second lactate threshold and the first lactate threshold to move up beneath as the aerobic base builds out. We have more room for improvement. That's one way of doing it. There are other ways. But the idea with improving your VO2 max, even if you are a long distance runner, like a marathon runner, or even an ultra marathon runner, and this is not going to be something that's part of your workout routine every week, obviously. This is going to be something that you do strategically at certain times of the year to raise that ceiling up, which is going to afford you more availability to then raise the other thresholds below it. And if you're looking to level up your training and start including things like VO2 max development and periodization, as we've been talking about today, but you're not exactly sure where to start and you would like some help learning how to implement that in your own training in a safe manner so you don't get injured, but you do improve your performance, obviously we'd love to help you. Just click the link in the description to book a call and we'll have a chat, see where you're at and see if we might be able to help you get to where you want to be.